In the church, yes. Okay.
Oh, and Dwight and Helen were
Yeah, they
wondering
wanted to know if they could be in it.
Well,
if that could be in
They
the
don't even
church.
Yeah. Well, I don't see a problem. So just, talk to him and we'll try and figure out somebody who can take that on.
Do you want to, Donna, do you want to pull that table a little back so you're not quite, because right now I've got to get my... I spent 40 years doing that. You think I'm going to stop now? And Murray's still snacking, but those sheets, if you could hand those out, Murray. You know, I was going to make less tonight, and I should have. I never even thought about it, but that's all right. There's extras. That's okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. We're short a few, and there's some people with hockey, and some people with hockey, and some people with health, and between hockey and health and hectic schedules and a variety of other things, we're down a few, but that's all right. So, just a little bit of framework of where this is headed or where this is beginning and kind of why we're doing this. We began several months ago with Jewish holidays and went through that series and the reality of the complications and the sheer weight of keeping all those responsibilities. Well, the reason we did that is as we move into Scripture, that fundamental issue existed. That is, Christianity was born, in a sense, out of Judaism, and along with it came the question of what does it mean to be a Christian, or how is this life lived? Now, and so the early church wrestled with that up to the point in Acts 15 where there was a great council to decide how much of the law should be enacted, what freedoms there should be, and so the council at Jerusalem said, basically the Gentiles are not under the law. We only asked, there were 4 laws they had to keep. And then the Gentiles were asked to give up some of their life, licentious and immoral behavior as well. So both sides were asked to, for the sake of the gospel, to purify themselves, or in another case, to free themselves. And so this background note becomes throughout the book of Acts, and it flows throughout the New Testament, where we get into books like Titus and Galatians, where this is the central conflict within these books. So that's kind of why. Basically what they're asking, though, throughout Scripture is, because Christianity was so new, is how do we deal with our past lives? Many of us became Christians as, children, and we really didn't have a past life. I didn't do a lot of wicked living before I was 6. So, for the bulk of my life, I've walked the faith, although certainly we all have those struggles, but so I didn't have to deal with a lot of, but if you're 40 or 50 coming to Christ, you've got an entire lifetime behind you, and how do you then? But as well as that, what elements of our culture do we bring into the faith? We kind of look at our community here at our church and go, well, what do you mean culture? And anybody who's ever gone to a different church knows, culture, right? I was watching a friend of mine's church, and very different church culture, right? And you're going, okay, you have created a church culture there where I would not feel very comfortable, and I suspect many of your people would come here and go, what's going on, and how come you're dead? And so back and forth. So we don't always think of that. But this sense of even how we view time and all those things that are part of it. So how do we deal with the past, and then how much do we bring into the present, and what's actually going on in the present? So that's kind of the foundation of it. So what I want to do is we divide you into 2 groups. This is nice and even. And we've got a little table project that is, amongst your group, I want you to pick a culture. It can be an ethnic culture that you're familiar with, or it could be a subculture. So maybe you want to do biker culture or aviation culture, farming culture, or whatever your ethnic background is. Same with you. I want you to pick a culture. It can be BC, northern BC culture. It can be mechanic culture. And then what I want you to do is, within that cultural group, what would you change or get rid of? Then, what would you keep, and how would you go about making those changes? So, pick your culture, ask yourself what within that culture. So if I was to say biker culture, I say, okay, we got to get rid of the alcohol. That would be certainly one thing we'd have to get rid of. The violence, the lawlessness, the beanie helmets. Like, there'd be things that I, say, well, what could we keep? The camaraderie, the open road, and then, of course, how would you go about instigating those changes within the culture? Because that's exactly what's happening. Titus, they're going into Crete, as we've seen, as a very wicked, perverse, immoral culture. The church is being planted, and now Paul's instructing Titus to go into that community. There are things in it that Paul tells Titus to keep, but much of Cretan culture has to be gone. And how do you then change that? You've got slaves and free people, where marriage was actually, somewhat loose, where promiscuity was rampant, where demonism and idol worship and immorality and alcoholism, this culture is just riddled with those things. So that's what we're going to look at tonight, is how do you create and maintain a Christian community based on the works of Paul's instructions and the Spirit's instructions in Acts 2 and 3. But let's start with what we know. So, pick a culture. What would you change? What would you keep? And how would you do it? So I'll give you like 5 minutes. One you're well versed in, Don, right?
What do we just eat? We're done. Yeah.
How are you through one?
Bring her back to the good culture.
Saskatchewan.
Yeah, exactly.
That was only.
That's fair, yeah. I mean, literally the culture.
Sure. I would put music on, but then YouTube will kick me off
That's
Yeah.
all
because you can't use
I
any
knew
music.
until I was in Bible school. That's it. Pretty much.
What culture are you doing?
I don't know, what do you?
We're doing Mennonite. What are you
You
doing?
are, okay, and do something else.
Okay. Get your own culture.
Yeah. Sounds
Okay. What do you know about Mennonite culture, Donna?
How about truck drivers, Harlan?
Oh.
How about truck driving culture? Trucking, that's a culture itself,
definitely
Harwell.
a culture.
Sure.
Yes, they are the, never home,
Yeah,
stay in the truck
yeah,
and
we
sleep
live in
for,
the road.
yeah,
6,000 hours a week.
Oh, I work,
Yeah.
their work ethic.
yeah.
Every week I put on 6 hours.
Very neat.
Then you gotta sleep and eat there, and sleep and eat there.
Yeah,
Very.
Set of tires every 3
Um,
days.
and you go in
You look
water.
at it, paint it too.
Yeah.
You had to grease it, and oil it, take oil and all that.
Oh, I remember that, I used to help my dad do all the tune-ups.
So they're.
The fertilizer season was even higher.
Yeah,
You run right through the week, eh?
yeah,
All right through the weekend. There was no time off.
yeah.
You gotta make your bread and butter. You gotta burn the log book and start another one.
Isn't the, did you guys have like super busy seasons and then off?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you know about
Yeah,
Mennonite
that's-
culture?
It's hot.
It's so, the spectrum is so broad.
You're not immersed in it even.
So it is.
Yeah.
I think you grow up in it.
Busy and.
See, my first minutes was all long-haired girls with blue eyeshadow. That was what they all looked like.
Really?
Yeah. So, when I was
Can
like,
we work on
they're
that?
heavy industrial
I'm
blue
sure.
eyes.
Prime suspect?
No, I don't, no.
No,
All done as well.
what would you keep
Yeah.
of that culture?
So my
I
version
guess
of
the
it is.
hardworking, mentality.
Your
The log book.
culture because
Oh, good.
The liar book.
can get rid of
the log book.
Yeah,
very, very, very
I think that was a good thing, that was a good thing. Yeah. Some guys just burn them like, no. You gotta keep the rules.
keep on
Yeah.
Dedication to the job, that's obviously a big one. And,
Yes.
And DOT is the guy that puts the rules for a truck, the DOT, they can look at you if you were speeding. Were you loaded? Last year, and how long it takes you to do it. And you can figure it out. If you're
Oh,
speeding,
the
they,
DOTs
Yeah.
are, yeah, they're pretty picky.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there you go, food.
Like, work ethic.
The work ethic.
And the deep
you can't lie about the book.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, a willingness to.
The DOT, they got a plus one.
Yeah.
More than a cop.
oh, yes, definitely.
Identity.
A respect for elders, maybe
right here now, so we're just gonna keep going.
You don't hold it.
What you would take out is maybe the lack
So,
of
you know, like how is
family
Yeah,
time.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
You're on the road all the time.
Exactly.
You're all by yourself.
think that
Yeah.
Get your hands on the wheel.
that they're gonna get ahead.
Your family
Well, but they,
gets-
the whole idea
Yeah.
is don't,
Yes,
farm,
that's the worst part.
you work with your.
All you got is that.
Yeah, you don't.
They got cell phones nowadays.
Yeah.
You can talk to your wife.
That's right.
That's, back in the days, you didn't have that.
That's right.
Yeah, right, you know, just communication.
Yeah, we have to run the telephone and phone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
People,
Yeah,
See, they're like speaking world school.
so probably
no
not.
one was good, wasn't good. Like young, it was like a cell phone.
Lots of trades.
That's good. Like the Mennonite heritage, they are Mennonite is, that's
You don't want to see that scary old man.
he's a micro. They will learn.
What are some other things?
All right, give me a couple more minutes, this is a huge exercise, but one to get you thinking.
Time and,
You took all that logbook, eh? You can't run over so many hours.
You know what, there are good things you can do as far as.
Call it liars.
yeah, there's probably lots of times if you could just put in another hour or two, you could get to a certain point that would be better than.
Yeah, part that you would maybe want to take out would be the
All right, let's, like I say, this is more of a thought exercise as much as anything. So, table A, what's your culture and what are you going to keep, what are you going to throw away, and how are you going to change it?
We did trucking culture
Very good.
and gonna keep the determination to work hard. We're gonna keep the maintaining things well. We're gonna get rid of when it's time to work, you gotta go work and miss the family.
Right, right.
And
all the lines.
we're gonna get rid of lying in the logbooks.
And barbiturates and amphetamines, also a big part of the trucking culture. Yeah. How are we going to bring about changes?
We didn't get there.
Okay, good enough.
Gonna put Harlan in charge again.
All right, putting Harlan in charge of the changes. All right, table 2. What did we pick for a culture?
Mennonite.
You picked a difficult task. All right, what are you going to get rid of?
Fear, men dominance, power views on education. And we didn't get the,
Yeah, we forgot to do that last part, but I think,
What are we going to keep?
no, we did that,
Oh.
but the part of how to change.
Oh, yeah,
it.
that's okay. That's the
we're
difficult
gonna
question.
keep work ethic, identity, conviction, community, and food.
All right.
I think you have to find a Mennonite who has healthier views and outlook on life and build into their life and get them to, he tells a friend and they
Keep
tell
the good
2
book.
friends.
Exactly. And then he gets kicked out of the colony,
Yeah.
but that's okay. That's another story.
Well, talk about dominant men. Look at the man was in the kitchen.
Excellent, excellent.
There you go.
All right, let's take a look
You got things backwards.
at what I honestly think is, this is Paul's blueprint for the early church, how to go in. He's writing to Titus, how to go into a culture and change it. So and the first thing he did last week we saw was appoint elders. So the structure of the church, he creates the structure of the church and he gives them moral qualifications. All right, so the first thing he tells Titus, we're in Titus chapter 2 and 3 today. We're going to finish the book off because it's a really short book. But if you take a look at verse 1, he says, "But as for you," he's instructing Titus, "proclaim the things which are fitting for sound doctrine." Where do you begin to change a culture? In truth, what people believe. The root of this culture and that culture, everything stems from what they believe. Money is the primary goal. You know, all the roots that are in that culture, right? So we begin with a culture by getting them to change what they believe before we try to get them to. What if you only try and change the action but not the belief?
Dead.
dead works, it doesn't last, right? You get hypocrisy, you get secret disobedience, you get all kind. It has to change. So Paul says to Timothy, first thing is proclaim. And the word there is sound, healthy teaching. So what are some of the symptoms of a sick and unhealthy culture? Take a look at the ones you looked at. What were the symptoms? Destructive to behavior, right? Fear is a sign of a sick and unhealthy culture.
Wanting to deceive.
Yeah, willful deception, yeah. Greed,
Greed.
yeah. Conflict, mismanaged conflict, right. So we can take a look and say, look, there's an unhealthy, so Paul says the solution to an unhealthy culture is healthy truth. Because they believe unhealthy. So if you look at any culture, you can see sick and unhealthy components of it. Families that can be toxic, right? Can have some pretty unhealthy aspects of their culture. And churches, too, can have some very unhealthy elements in their culture. So, interesting. The word here, the root word he uses is the word hygiene, which means making sick folks whole. So he says, teach doctrine that makes sick people healthy and whole. That which is wholesome, that which gives life. The first mark of any culture is that it must produce health and flourishing. So what aspects of the culture that you looked at produced flourishing and health? Community, absolutely. Yep. Understanding roles is a healthy thing. Food, healthy food. They're not prone to junk food. What are the healthy and beneficial aspects of trucking culture?
Looking out for each other on the road.
Absolutely. There's a sense of community, right? A strong sense of identity with them. They have pretty good music sometimes. Back in the 80s they did, 18 wheels and a dozen rows. And then there was Teddy Bear, which made us all cry, on the radio. This is your see me, buddy, Teddy Bear. Anyhow, sorry. Christine and I were listening to the radio one time driving, and I'm just bawling, like, oh, Teddy Bear. I like trucker music. What else is healthy within trucking communities? They bring us food. The job itself is a beneficial. There's some nobility to it, right? The vast majority of goods in Canada is shipped by truck, not by rail anymore. So there's a root of healthiness. But the problem is there's so much that's unhealthy. All right. Then he says, where do you start changing a culture? Older men. Take a look at verse 2. The first thing you target is older men, because that's the foundation of a culture. Well, it's interesting. In this culture, that word means men 50 and up. So the three of us at least, right? 50 and up is defined as older within this culture. So, and he says, older men are to be what? What's the first word? Temperate. That word means complete clarity of mind that results in good judgment. So temperance is non-alcoholic, right? Clarity of mind. Good judgment. It means a person who avoids excesses, extravagance, or overindulgence of appetites and passions. So we think about older men by a certain age. I was talking with a guy today, he said, when did you become wise? He said, when I got older. Because a lot of the things didn't matter anymore. I learned that this is unimportant, that this is, and I learned truly what's of great value. So temperate men are men who are past that overindulgence. Remember when you were young, how indulgent you are. Like, oh, I need this, and I want this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. You just indulge in every whim and desire, right? Well, as you get older, you go, I'm okay. It's good to sit with my feet up once in a while. I don't have to do that. And in control of their passions. What's one of the hallmarks of young men? Wild. They're passionate. They're reckless, right? As we get a little older, Harlan, maybe we don't go quite as fast anymore, right? We're a little more temperate, and our passions are a bit more subdued. All right, then he says that they are to be dignified. When you think of a dignified older man, A, who comes to mind, and B, what comes to mind? Who is a dignified older man? A butler, yes. Donna's been watching some... an honorable person. Is there an individual that you think of as dignified?
Danny Joe.
I think of Danny's very dignified. Bernie Vanderwall is very dignified.
Yes.
Yeah, there's something about the way he carries himself.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Very self-controlled.
Yes, very. So the word here, honorable or august, means there's impressiveness and dignity that comes with age. They behave reverently. They're just their character, their nature evokes respect. You meet that person, and just by who they are, there's something about them that you just would naturally respect them. And that's what he's talking about here. All right, dignified, and then Good old self-control, which makes perfect sense. Controlling your impulses and your desires. Self-restraint. Then what's next?
I have sensible.
Sensible works. Yeah. Sensible is self-control. They make their life. They're in control of their senses. Yeah. Okay. What do you have after that?
Sound in faith.
Sound and faith. That's the word healthy, flourishing faith. You think about a boat that's sound, the water's not in it. It's a healthy, the body's sound, the mind is sound. Their faith doesn't have a lot of holes in it anymore. All right, and then
Like this, in love.
in love, that's right. They're
Sound in faith, sound in love.
exactly. They're sound in faith, they're sound, and the word sound modifies the next set of words, right? Their faith is sound, and their love is sound. And their perseverance is sound. Perseverance is, guess what? That's the word we talked about on Sunday. To be under, that's our upomeno, to abide under. So what do? They live, they persevere. They don't flee. That was the image we used on Sunday. Steadfast and unflinching, bearing up under the heavy load. Older men should be able to carry the heavy load. So what do we want in elders or leadership? We want people who can carry the load. What happens if you overstress out a young man? He tends to flee, right? Can't deal with the load. I am out here. We're old men. We go, yeah, been there, done that, saw that. It's not going to get any worse. I can tough this out. Yeah, another mile. Exactly, Harlan. Yep.
More weight.
I've done more weight. I've done 1,000 miles. 1,001's not going to kill me, right? And so, describe this person to me. What do they look like, sound like, act like?
Calm.
Calm,
Patient.
patient,
Kind.
kind,
Generous.
generous, wise. There's a certain calmness to their behavior.
Bold.
Bold. They're not rattled by things. Things don't get them upset. They can roll with it because they've rolled already 1,000 miles, right? So he says, if you want to change the culture, the first people you had to address is older men. What happens to a culture when older men don't behave like this?
Young people don't care either, because they're not doing it, so why should I?
Exactly. There's no example. It doesn't go well. It falls apart, right? So as we see older men in our culture, they want to be 29 again, right? They don't accept responsibility. We end up with a culture that decays with its senior leadership. And we look around and we say, where are the wise men in our culture? Where are the good leaders? Where are the men who should be taking responsibility for their communities, their families? You look around our community, it's almost all places the women are doing it. Whether it's, any agency, music festival, or it's all women. And when our men, our older men especially, forsake their communities because they're busy, I don't want to do it, that's when communities fall apart. And it's interesting, as we get older, we should be less willing to forsake. We have more invested. We've got decades invested in our churches and our communities. Why would you give that up now? But we're seeing the opposite. We were talking about our men's conference. How do we get young men out to these things, right? Well, we've got the old men. We've got that group.
Yes.
Well, we're going to get to the young men. All right. Well, if first you're going to get a hold of the old men, who are you going to get a hold of next? Take a look at verse 3.
The old women.
All the women. Donna, could you read verses 3 to 5 for us? How appropriate. You're the oldest woman here.
Yep. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good, that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sensible, pure, workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be dishonored.
All right. If Paul's instructing them to be like that, what were the women in Crete like?
Not that.
Not that. That typical older lady who's cranky, who's a gossip, who is, leaning over the bottom. This whole thing about mommy needs her wine now in our culture is so prevalent, right? It's everywhere. And they were neglecting the young women, saying, you know what? They put their hands up and saying, we're done.
Not my circus.
Not my circus. Those girls are on their own. And so Paul says, listen, you older women, you have a role in shaping our culture. And the first thing he wants with older men is to be temperate. What's the first thing he wants with women?
Reverence.
Reverent. By the way, in this culture, older women were 60 and up. So because men died earlier, so I guess that
You're new.
qualified, dear. You just cut the threshold. The word reverent here comes from the root word being priest-like in their behavior. So how does the classic priest behave? You know, there's a calmness, a self-control, a gentleness, right? So he says older women should be almost acting like priests, not in their responsibilities, but in their behavior and their manner. You think about the older ladies in our church, the dignity of them. You know, we have several women in our church. They simply possess dignity. I still call one of them Mrs., you know, out of reverence for her and respect, right? I could call her by her first name, but it doesn't seem right, even though, you know, I'm up to that threshold.
Reverence, in my mind, is almost like a submission, right? If you revere someone, you submit to them, right? That
Absolutely.
is-
Holding in high
is that
regard.
the same? Like, my mind says that's similar.
It's
It's not the same, but
close.
But if you revere someone,
Yes.
you yield to them. You like,
Yeah, you hold them in high regard.
yeah.
Yeah. Because the word,
It's like a very high respect. You have a very high respect for
absolutely, yeah,
for everybody.
right. But in particular for older women.
Right, but if he says older women are to be reverent in their behavior.
Right. No, their character is to be reverent, not that they are to be revering others.
No, but it says in their behavior.
Yes, yes.
So you're supposed to be behaving reverently.
Yes, that's right. They're to behave in a dignified manner.
Very respectful manner that they are
Exactly. Because what were they behaving like?
very
Irreverently. Yeah. Think of Wild Old Women, which is popular in our culture as well. And then what's the next topic he hits? Not
It's not just gossip, malicious.
malicious.
Gossiping's okay, as long as
Yeah,
it's
not
not
the longer.
malicious.
Because what's the typical image of older women getting together? Hen parties, right?
I didn't know how to say it.
Yeah, yeah, having tea together, the gossiping and the destruction. Yeah, the word, I mean, simply means literally to throw between. A gossip is one who gets in between and just throws words at them. So stop gossiping. And then, I love that, not enslaved to much wine. Obviously, there was a problem with alcoholism in this
Vague
community.
statement, though, it's like, that's not much.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm not enslaved, I'm in control.
Yeah, I can quit anytime I want.
Yeah, not in this case, yeah. And then women are supposed to be teaching what is good, that is engaged in the life of young women. Older women should be teaching young women. So teaching what is good, so that they may, and there's the connection, so they may encourage young women. And what are they supposed to teach young women?
To love their husband.
Love their husbands.
I find that funny.
What culture do you have to teach women to love their husbands?
Well, loving is choosing.
Exactly.
Right? And that is, it's not infatuation or feeling, but it is choice.
So if you would ask Donna, what does it mean to love your husband after 40 years of marriage? Nothing, against someone who's only been married for a brief time, and I know you love each other.
Is this rhetorical, or am I supposed to?
No, this is just on the table. But you think about, what does 40 years of love look like versus young love, right? And the nature of that love. So, see, look, this is what it means to love your husband, to endure with them. So teach them what true love is over the long haul. And that's good. So, and it's good. You don't sit down and say, okay, you're going to have some problems in your marriage, you're going to go through this. This is what it means to love your husband over the long run. But also to love
Your children.
their children. These were not good moms in this community. They needed instruction on how to love their children, which tells you a lot about Cretan culture.
They were selfish.
Oh, they were
incredibly
incredibly.
selfish.
And we still have that problem today, mothers not loving their children, abandoning them, all kinds of horrible things. So look, this is what it means to love your children, sacrificially to give. And I think a lot of young moms could teach other moms how to love their children. We see that in our community. All right, and then to teach them to be sensible. That word means avoiding extremes, a sense of what's appropriate for them. And then to be pure. Because what's Cretan culture like? Impure and immoral, grossly immoral, right? So this is moral purity or sexual purity and marital faithfulness. So love your husband, love your children, don't fool around. That's what they were having to teach them, which tells you how bad the situation was. And then to be workers at home. This is good. The word busy means busy in managing their household, because obviously it wasn't happening. Then to be kind. This is really a good word. Kind means, it's when Jesus says, and the seed fell into good soil, that's the word there.
Kind soil.
Yeah, kind. What does kind soil do?
Well, would receive and nourish.
Exactly. It causes it to grow and produces.
Hospitable.
Exactly. Produces life, right? That which has the proper characteristic for performing the expectation of its function. Right? So kind soil, a kind a kind wind. So these women had to be instructed, these young women in particular, had to be instructed to build their homes, love their husband, love their children, to produce the life of the community. If old men fail the community, what happens when old women fail the community? The next generation perishes, right? Then we get them not teaching and not showing. And then he says, and being subject to their own husbands. This is to be, the word literally means to listen under, to be willing to listen to their husbands.
You're gonna lose viewers there.
Yeah, I know. It's the term for the military usage where a soldier listens to the commands of the one above them. So listen to your husband so that God will not be dishonored. Under submission. I love that. Being listening under. All right. What are old men supposed to be like? Harlan, you have a thought?
Listen to let me obey.
It does, Harlan. It does. Yeah, that's right in the word. Yeah. I like the shake. That was good. So what were old men supposed to be like?
Danny Trotwine.
Danny Trotwine. What are old women supposed to be like? Donnie Esau.
Yeah.
Oh, honey, that's high praise for you. Yeah. Good teachers, respectful of their behavior, not gossips, not drunkards. It just describes the opposite. What were these women like? They must have just been awful old women. Like,
If you watch any movie
well, yeah.
that's like the get-together party with all the wine, and my husband was terrible, and my children are doing everything wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Pretty much you don't want to.
And that's what they were like then, like the images that we have around us today. Versus, you think of that older woman, like our grandmothers, who were, they were respectable, they would dress modestly, they were, they were fierce, but they had good marriages, they looked after their
That's
children.
not reverence.
Yeah, that's reverent. There's something that, all right, well, now that we've got the older generation, the 50 and 60s up, that's where you begin a society, then you turn into the younger generation. Joni, if you would read for us verses 6 through 8.
In chapter 2.
2, please.
Similarly,
Yes, similarly.
urge the young men to be self-controlled in everything. Set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about it.
All right, he uses the word likewise or similarly. So in the sense of it says, older women teach younger women, likewise, there's a person missing in this sentence that should be obvious. Well, no, you older men teach younger men. So likewise, as older women are to teach younger women, likewise urge the young men. You older men should be instructing younger men. Make sense? So in a similar
He
fashion,
kind of forgot to talk about the young men before he got to the women.
Yeah.
He talking about the men and the women teaching, and same wise, you young, old guys.
that's right, that's exactly what he's
He
saying.
forgot to talk about the young guys before he got to the women.
Yeah, he should, he just kind of reorders it because he's,
Yeah.
Is he going like in order of importance?
he's going in order of influence.
Influence?
Yeah, so a society is influenced by by older people, right? Then those influence the next generation down. And then he's going to go to slaves, so he goes through the system, right? If you look at the structure of the culture, older people, younger people, slaves, then all of you.
So, who is responsible for the young men?
Us, older men are to, likewise, you older men, which is not in the sentence.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's
it's-
Donna's problem to deal with my voice.
Yeah, no.
It's kind of, I would tend to agree, but
I'll get my
It's
stapler out.
it's in like manner. It's in like manner you should urge, because he's talking to Titus, right?
right.
So in like manner, you Titus, you older
I
guy.
don't want to argue with the sake of
No,
arguing,
it's funny,
that's
but
kind
you're
of
right.
something we put there without, what's the context? Well, he's talking to Titus. He's talking to Titus.
That's right. And he's saying, likewise, you urge. The word urge is come alongside in order to guide or encourage. So the phrase is, how do we influence young men? Women are to teach their women. What are men supposed to do? They're supposed to come alongside. Because young men don't learn easily, right? It's hard to teach young men, right, Dylan?
It is a job.
It is a job. So what do we do is we come alongside them. We live life with them. We walk with them. We work them. She says, you older men, basically, come alongside these young men to be what? Oh, yeah, examples or sensible, verse 6. Because what are young men like?
See, but I'm not an old man. You can't put me in that group.
No, well, you're in this weird, yeah, you're
I
sort
just
of,
look old.
yeah. But are you sensible?
I'm not in that old man group.
So the word sensible here is to keep one's mind safe or sound, to be in one's right mind, to think about oneself soberly, self-control or restraint. We have to teach young men to be self-controlled, because what are young men like?
Wild.
Wild. I don't remember self-control as a teenager. That was far from the occasion,
3
right?
different dreams in one day.
Exactly. It was, yeah, exactly. And then 4 different activities in one night, right? Think we could break into that place? Yeah, let's try it. Like, did anybody tell you that was a bad idea? Nobody did. You know, the frontal lobe was not working quite yet. So we have to have older men come along and say, you know, maybe doing 140 miles an hour down the highway is a bad idea. And if we're in the car with them alongside, it prevents some of that, right? Maybe staying out till 4 in the morning. You know, not a good idea. So teach them, verse 7. In all things, then, this is instructing, show yourself to be an example of good deeds. So how do we teach young men to do good deeds?
By example.
By example, by doing good deeds ourselves. Come along with me. As I do good, this is how good is done. And teaching them, all right? With purity and doctrine, that is, you know, don't get muddled or corrupted. Dignified, there's our word, dignified, serious. Sound in speech, we got that same image of sounding whole, which is beyond reach, beyond reproach. Because what do young men do? They run their mouths, right? If you think women are bad at gossip and talk, you should hang out with young guys. It's all just blah, blah, especially the oil patch, right? You know, that it's just they're running their mouth all the time. They are not sound speech. And young men are prone to lying and exaggerating and telling stories. And he says, in such a way that no one, their opponents, will be put to shame and have nothing bad. What we have to teach young men is how to have a good reputation. It's interesting because David says, oh Lord, do not remember the sins of my youth. Why?
He's not proud of it.
Because he's not. Because when we're in our youth, that's when we tend to sin the most, right? And David says, "Oh, please don't remember the sins of my youth." And it's a good thing that many of us didn't have Facebook or social media when we were young. Otherwise, pictures would be everywhere of all the stupid stuff we did. This poor generation, everything's being documented. All right. So this is the categories, right? Older men. Here's how you change. You change older men. Then you get older women, and older women instruct younger women. Then older men come alongside younger men. So he's moving his way through a society. Verse 9 and 10. Murray.
Teach slaves to be subject to their masters in everything, to try to please them, not to talk back to them, and not to steal from them, but to show that they can be fully trusted, so that in every way they will make the teaching about God, our Savior, attractive.
Very good. So now we've got this layer of slaves, right? We're working our way through society. What does that tell you about the slaves on Crete?
Very good.
They weren't very
Not
good.
good slaves.
They were not good slaves. They were disobedient. They were liars. They were thieves. They did not. And so he uses the same word, urge, again. Come alongside the slaves and teach them to obey their masters. There's that repetition of the same. Teach them to listen under their masters. Voluntarily submit to their masters.
You think about all that, he was asking some big things.
You betcha.
Titus is just a book about listening to others.
Yeah, there's a huge, yeah, exactly. Listen to God, listen to others, and don't let others talk about you bad. Yeah. And the big emphasis is on doing good. We'll see that. So, be subject to be pleasing to them. Interesting phrase. Interesting that, just to note, the call to subjugation to the masters who for the most part were pagans. Submission in such a potentially adverse circumstance represented an act of faith. The born-again bond slave would be trusting in God to direct their life, to work out their purposes in His time. The word argumentative is don't talk back.
So, this is to say that he is speaking, Titus is speaking to all the people, not everyone, but to all who would be Christians.
He's writing to the church.
The church, because
Yes.
it's not like
This
they're
is-
asking an impossible thing.
No, that is not
But
to the culture
those
of...
servants who claim to be followers of Christ, to those men, women.
Exactly. No, this is written not to the culture, but to the church. And we're talking about, like, you got to remember the church culture at the time is chaotic as well, right? Full of heretics, immorality. So he's saying, how do we change the culture from within? Good. And he says to them, don't talk back, which is hard for all of us. I'm flying. All right. But showing yourself all good faith so that it will adorn the doctrine. Doctrine is adorned by good deeds. All right. We're working our way through. We got 15 minutes left. All right. Verses 11 through 14. Elena.
For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in the present age, looking for the blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for himself his own special people, zealous for good works.
Good.
Speaking okay.
So who's this now? This section written to? Everybody. So older men, older women, younger men, slaves, and now, so where these were specific instructions about certain character and certain, he says now everybody, this is the expectation for every believer in the church, how they are to behave. Bringing salvation to not all people as in all of Cyprus, what island are we on again? Crete, but all the people in the church he's talking to. Now salvation certainly is available to all people, but we got to remember the context. Oh, sweetie. All right, instructing us to do what's the first thing? Deny ungodliness and worldly desire. How good are we at denying ourselves? Especially this culture, right? We're an indulgent society. We can't wait 5 minutes for anything, right? So he uses the word deny ungodliness. It was a culture that had a lack of reverence for God and any hallowed institutions. It was a culture of sacrilegious word and deed. Sound familiar? He's almost describing the world we live in, right? So he says, all of us. What's that? So he says, deny. There's 3 twos, by the way. To deny and then to live. How do we live, according to this? Sensibly. How else do we live? Righteously and godly in this present age. So, self-controlled, soberly, control over our impulses, righteously, a godly manner. So we are to deny, to live, and then to look. Looking to the blessed hope, right? Always focusing on that. And then ultimately, eager for good deeds. Well, we're almost done this section because he's got a few more. Then he says, verse 15, these things, he's telling Titus, speak, exhort, rebuke with all authority. Boy, let no one disregard you. Let's pick it up in chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Ethan.
Remind them to be subject to rulers and authorities, to obey, to be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, to be peaceable, gentle, showing all humility to all men.
Good. So this is the same section, just the chapter numbers throw us off. That's instructed to all of us. So what's the first thing again he brings up? There's a theme here. Subject. Wives, be subject to your husbands. Slaves, be subject to your masters. And all of you be subject to... Oh, this is a hard one. The word here is to be under firm control. You must be... Skip. Yeah, let's skip this. You must allow yourself to be under firm control of the government. Who is the governing body of this island? Rome. He's telling the church, don't be rebellious against the government. Be under firm, allow yourself to be under firm, and the word is literally subordination, being subordinate to them. And that we are to be people in the system known as by their obedience. Obedience to who? The government. It's all in context, right? Literally obey your ruler. Christians are to be known as people who obey the government. Oh, boy, well, I won't go back to 2019. But there it is, right there in black and white. And be ready for every good deed. Slander no one, that is, speak no harm or falseness to them. Then he uses the word contentious, that is, don't have a chip on your shoulder. How many Christians have a chip on their shoulder against the government? Anyhow, we'll leave that in there, but that's in there. Okay, and then he says, you are to be gentle. What is a gentle person like? I always think of Harlan when I think of someone who's gentle, by the way. What's a gentle person like?
Murray.
Murray. Gentle. Yeah. The word literally means sweet reasonableness.
Aw, that's Murray.
That is Murray. I love this word. Someone who is sweetly reasonable. It contains ideas of indulgent consideration. Aristotle defined this word as indulgent consideration of human infirmities. Someone who's willing to be very considerate, recognize when someone's weak. So, if we see someone sick or weak, we go, you know what, I'm willing to make allowances for that. Now, let me just throw you out a bunch of words that are all contained in this one. Free from sternness. We're good with sternness. Free from violence. Holding yourself back with effort, controlling your temper. Having no bias towards favoritism. Being mild. Exerting a soothing or easing influence. That they're fair and proper. Think about someone who expresses a soothing influence. You get around them, and you just feel like you're in a beautiful place. They're there. They are to be gentle. And the image, the word literally means a soothing wind. This person should be a soothing wind, or a healing medicine. Christians in our society are to be healing medicine. Calm, gentle, self-control, don't have a chip on their shoulder, work within the government, obviously there's all kinds of issues there. But these people who are patient and restrained, that they, in the midst of difficulties, they don't fly off the handle. The word denotes humble and a gentle attitude. Submissive in the offense, no desire for revenge, controlling their temper. They don't get bitter and resentful at the drop of a hat. They're a soothing influence over someone who's in a state of anger and bitterness. That's an amazing person. You're in a room and everybody's just flying, and they kind of walk in, the whole room calms down. That's what Christians are to be. In a culture that's gone insane, we are the Pepto-Bismol of society. That's our society. We got heartburn, nausea, upset stomach, and diarrhea. That's our world. And you and I are pink. We just come in and we soothe people. Exactly. That's an amazing description of what Christians are to be like. And all too often, Christians are seen as aggressive and at war with the culture. And he says, no, we're not at war. We're actually the influence that brings healing to our culture. And then, all that's the positive. So that's our first question. What should we do? Then he pulls up and says, this is what we are to reject. Harlan, you want to read verse 3?
Once we too were foolish and disobedient, we were misled by others and became slaves to many evil pleasures and wicked desires. Our lives were full of resistance and envy. We hated others and we hated us. They hated us.
Good. So what is Cretan culture like?
Malicious, envious, hateful, lustful.
And he says, this is the culture we're going to reject. We're going to reject foolish, disobedient, deceived, lustful, spending our life in malice and envy, a society that hates, and not only hateful, hates one another. That's the culture. So as you looked at, the cultures you looked at, said, what aspects are we supposed to reject? I suspect some of them were in that. You think about foolish and disobedient, deceived, to thinking this is the best way. Enslaved, trucking, a lot of enslaved to lust and desire, right? More money, bigger truck, nicer stuff, right? Hateful, or fearful. It's not in this list, but legitimate part. All right, so that's the big section. We've got 5 minutes left or so. Then he pulls up how we're going to do it, which was our third question, which we struggled to get to. We're going to move to this. Verses 4 through 7.
But when the kindness of God, our Savior, and his love for mankind appeared, he saved us, not on the basis of deeds which we have done in righteousness, but according to his mercy, by the washing of regeneration and renewing by the Holy Spirit, whom he poured out upon us richly through Jesus Christ, our Savior.
Paul is going to give 3 steps to transforming our culture. And the first one is by washing of regeneration and renewing of the Holy Spirit. What's the first step? What's that?
You have to sing the song. That's an old chorus.
Man, I can't remember that one.
not the works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy, he saves us. Something like that.
Oh, excellent. So what's the first thing we have to do? We have to wash up. We got to wash our churches. We got to wash our culture. Washing of regeneration and the renewing of the Spirit. The phrase literally is through the bath of regeneration. Only used twice in the New Testament, but a very clear image. What does the Holy Spirit do? He washes up. When we are born again, Jesus says, born again of the Spirit and of water, right? We get washed up. Baptism, this symbol of cleansing and purifying. And you look at that list of all those bad things, they all got to be washed away. Disobedience and foolishness and lust and malice and hate all have to be washed away. And how? And then what? By being renewed. An extremely rare term. It means to become new. Idea is not new. And by the way, the preposition here is for both of them. It's not two things. It's one work of grace. The Spirit washes us and then renews us. Can we change culture by making external changes? No. Only by the renewing work of the Holy Spirit.
I mean, unless you scare people.
Right. You can legalize things and you can scare people and you can use but they'll always resist it, right? You have to change the heart. And the only way to change a culture or to change a church is the work of the Spirit. The washing of regeneration and the renewing. Every church needs to be renewed. Every life needs to be renewed. There's a great line that says about the church, once changed, always changing, right? Once renewed, always being renewed. And then he gives us two more truths. He says, secondly then, embrace. Verse 8, Joni. Chapter 3, verse 8. It is. It's on the top of page 6, but you don't have page numbers because I needed more space on the page. You got it.
This statement is trustworthy, and concerning these things I want you to speak
Confidently.
so that those who have believed God will be careful to engage in good deeds. These things are good and beneficial for people.
So, how do you change a culture? Within, first you get washed up, renewed by the Holy Spirit, and then what do?
Speak confidently.
Speak confidently about these things, teach them, and go and do good deeds. Literally, take the lead in doing good. How does a church change the world? By taking the lead in the culture to doing good. How do we change our church from within? By taking the lead in doing good. We lead by example. Elders are required to take the lead in doing good. Older women teach young women by taking the lead in doing good. We all should be willing, okay, where am I taking the lead? It's interesting, in dog sledding, the two dogs closest to the sled are called the wheel dogs. Why? Because they're the wheels that drive it. They're the big, strong dogs, right? But way up front on the right-hand side here, this is the lead dog. And 99% of the times, it's a female. Because mama knows best. And all the other dogs behind her go, yes, mom, right? But she leads, and she does very little pulling. But she goes left and right. She's the one who knows where she's going, right? And so she leads the entire team. And when you say ha, she knows, G, she knows, back and forth, left and right, right? So she basically takes the lead on the team. And the big wheel dogs, they just kind of stumble along after these big goofs. Like,
Follow the rear end in front of you.
I follow her, yeah, because she's usually an unfixed female.
Oh.
Yeah, so that maybe is more biology than psychology in this case. But the principle is there that we take the lead in doing good, and the rest of the team follows the lead, right? So, Harlan, how many wheels on a truck?
18.
How many wheels steer? 2, right?
4. Sears, 2.
2 steer, yeah, 2 steering wheels, right? And the other, and the other 16 follow.
Yeah.
Well, some drive the wheels, but basically, all it takes is 2 wheels, and the other 16 follow along. And in a church, it takes 2 good wheels to lead. All right, and we lead by doing what is good, and by teaching what's right. And then verses 9 through 11, Dylan.
But avoid foolish controversies and genealogies and strife and disputes about the law, for they are unprofitable and worthless. Reject the factitious man after a first and second warning, knowing that such a man is perverted and is sinning, being self-condemned.
Well, this is pretty clear now, right? So we are to embrace
Factious.
factious, yes,
Factious.
someone factious or divisive.
I was like, I've heard that word before.
Yeah.
Factious.
So what we do is we embrace good teaching, we embrace good deeds, and then we avoid what? All the rest. None of it. He says, just stop arguing about all the petty stuff. How many churches argue over, this point and this point? And Murray, are you pre-trib, post-trib, or mid-trib?
I'm not pre.
There you go. But for us to argue over that, right? We could share ideas and exchange and instruct, but for the church to argue over these things, he says, and in this case especially about Jews, he's talking about genealogies and all the finer points of the 613 laws, because that's going on in the church, right? Disputations about the laws. Why? Because they're useless and worthless. Then it gets a little tricky. If someone's coming into your church and they're divisive, they're splitting up your church, how many warnings do they get? Two. And there's reject the first and second warning. You get 2 warnings. He says, the text says, turn from such men who have turned from Christ.
I guess that's third strike, you're out.
Yeah, that's right. Third strike, you're out. See, if someone has turned from Christ, it says the church can turn from that. That's a very...
There's some heavy stuff in there on how you
church
do,
discipline.
Preserving the integrity of the church.
Exactly, and the unity of the brethren. Yeah, if somebody comes in and they start, teaching false doctrine in the church, we as those who lead by doing good have the responsibility to instruct that person and
But it
say,
seems it's never something that big and obvious.
No.
Like the enemy always uses small, divisive things.
yeah.
to
This
say-
church is raw.
Yes.
It's so blatant, it's so
Yes.
young, right?
Yes.
All right, we wraps it up in verses 12 through 14 with personal concerns. I'll do this because of the names. When I send Artemas and Tychicus to you, or Tychicus, make every effort to come up with me to Nicopolis, for I have decided to spend the winter there. It's a very personal letter. Diligently help Zenas, the lawyer, and Apollos on their way, so that there is nothing lacking for them. He's talking about helping a lawyer with finances. Figure that one out. Then he lands it on this. 14 wraps up Paul's entire argument. Our people must learn to engage in good deeds, to meet pressing needs, so that they will not be unproductive. This sounds like good deeds as in good deeds in the community. What he's talking about here is work, physical labor. Our people must learn to get to work to meet the pressing needs. So when this person, if you look at 23, so that nothing is lacking for them, there was a financial need in this ministry, he says, our people must learn to work to help these people out, which tells you that all Cretans are lazy.
Lazy, what was it, lazy gluttons and liars?
And liars, yeah. It says, don't be lazy. Work hard so you can help others. Teach our people to, can you imagine? I have to teach these people how to work. Man, I've never been in a ministry that was a problem. I teach them how to rest. I had to teach them how to play. Never had to teach people how to work because they're all their backgrounds, right? Although once in a while you find the occasional lazy person who needs a little reminder they need to work. All right, learn. I love what Mark Twain said. Always do right. This will gratify some people and astonish the rest. So let me ask you, according to these instructions, what are the marks of a flourishing culture within the church, obviously?
People who do good deeds.
People who do good deeds. Good. What else?
Look after the needs of others.
Yeah, look after the needs of others. Good. What are the characteristics of the older men in the church, in a flourishing church? What's it? Danny. Yeah, Danny. They're Dannies, right? They're Danny and Murray. They're respectful. They're wise. What are the characteristics of the older women in the church? They're Donnas. They're teaching others. They're not showy.
If they're grumpy, you know you've done wrong.
That's right. You've crossed the line and you know it. What are the characteristics of the young men in the church then? Well, first off, they're learning. Young men have to be willing to come alongside, right? I can say, I'll come alongside and help you if I don't want your help. So they have to be willing to learn, right? And have their passions. We don't want young men not to have passion. We want all the fire in the world. But what happens if fire gets out of control? What happens if fire is in control?
You can send your bullet a long ways.
Exactly. You can go to the moon if you can control.
Yes. I like that.
Yeah. If you have the fire under control. So Paul paints us this beautiful picture of a fully functioning, flourishing church. It is God's design. And what's missing in this description, though? Music, what time you have service, what you wear to church, all the stuff that we think makes up culture. right? What your hair looks like, all that. Later on, he'll talk about women being, somewhat modest in that. But a lot of stuff that we define as culture is missing. This is all about character, for the most part, and good deeds towards one another. So the challenge for us as we wrap up is that how do we then implement this culture within our own church culture, and how do we then, as a church, implement that within our community culture? All right, I'll leave that with you. And we will start next week, Galatians. That wraps up Titus.